Nice. There's a lot of things that sets Mega Man 1 apart from its sequels. It's the only mainline game with 6 Robot Masters instead of 8. The item pickups look entirely different. The physics feel slightly off. Mega Man just feels heavier. Damn it! After you beat the bosses, you gotta collect this funky little doodad to end the stage. No idea what this thing is, though the Japanese instruction manual, instruction poster, mentions needing to retrieve the Robot Master's heart parts, so it's probably that. Iframes won't protect you from spikes. There's a difference between the weapon menu and the pause menu. Capcom, your actions have consequences. And of course, Mega Man 1 is the only mainline Mega Man game to have a scoring system.
But why? Why would you do that? Why would you do any of that?
So we can all agree that high score and point systems are pretty worthless, yeah? There were a lot of vestigial game mechanics that carried over to consoles from the arcade days. Time limits and limited lives seem to have lasted the longest, but I think everybody agreed that nobody was playing games for score. Simply put, the points don't matter.
Guys want to fight?
And kudos to Capcom for recognizing this and ditching the score system by the very next game. It was a mechanic that nobody would really miss, plus it would be kind of a drag every time you beat a Robot Master and you had to sit through the little score tally. Only very recently have I actually begun to consider this mechanic at all. I feel like in my more recent years I've developed a compulsion to thoroughly research and dissect the games I love the most, and Mega Man is my favorite video game franchise of all time, so yeah, sure, let's analyze the score system in Mega Man 1. Okay, let's start with the basic stuff. Every time you kill an enemy, you get a set amount of points. Different enemies are worth different amounts, so you can check the enclosed instruction book for details. Pretty standard stuff, but also, sometimes enemies drop these. This is called a score ball, and they only show up in Mega Man 1. Side note, I always hated score balls because whenever I made it to the boss hallway as a kid, I would run back and forth trying to grind health drops from enemies, which would take forever because whenever an enemy dropped an item, it was most likely one of these worthless little gumballs. So there's an example of the score system being an active detriment. Anyways, collecting a score ball doesn't actually add any score. Instead, your score balls are tallied after beating the boss, where they are then multiplied by 1,000 per and then added to your score. The number of score balls you can cash in caps at 99, so collecting 100 or more would be a tremendous waste of time. In more ways than one. At first I thought that if, for whatever reason, you wanted to get a high score, then you could just grind enemies like the Pepes who spawn forever and just grind scoreball drops. But at that point you might as well just tape down the button and ignore item drops completely, because the Pepes themselves give you points too. I mean, it's not like there's a time limit, so you could just leave the game on all night and boom, max points. Except haha, once you hit 10 million points, the counter loops back around. You idiot.
Oh, fuck.
You spent half a day grinding for points for Mega Man for a YouTube video. You should think twice before being born stupid. This brings me to my next point, which is that usually in other older video games from around the same time, doing something like this would at least get you more lives. This is usually the one and only benefit to interacting with a score system. You know, when you play Sonic and you beat a special stage and the tiny Sonic shows up and it's all like doodle-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. But score never gives you any 1-ups in Mega Man 1, and you already have infinite continues. Also, side note, while I was grinding to see if there was a maximum score, I noticed that the lives counter had gone above 9. Normally lives cap at 9, so I figured I would grind to max lives to see how far the rabbit hole goes. I mean, if I didn't do it now, I'd risk being curious about it later and wasting my time again, so I figured I should do it now. Unsurprisingly, it caps at 99. I also checked to see if this looped around too, but no, it just stays at 99. I tried dying after that, which brings the counter down to 98, so it's not like certain other games where it secretly keeps track after 99, it really does cap. Anyways, what was I saying? I suppose I should also mention that continuing from a game over will set your precious score back to 0, but I think that's the last thing a player's gonna be worrying about after losing a bunch of progress. That's another thing. I can kind of get comparing your score to other players to prove that you're some kind of better gamer, but unless you're training for the Nintendo World Championship or something, 99% of players are going to compare how far they make it into the game, not the high score. No one's going to be like, oh, you beat all 6 bosses and the Yellow Devil? Well, too bad for you, because my number's bigger. It's also really strange that the game doesn't even have a scoreboard. Like, having a score system kind of implies a scoreboard, right? And like a little screen for putting in your initials so you can bring your friends over and brag to them. But no, Mega Man 1 doesn't even save your score, which means there's no high score either. There's only just the score. If you wanted to show your friends your super impressive Mega Man score, they'd either have to be in the room with you or you'd have to take a picture of it or something. Okay, how about this? Say you and your friend are competing to see who's better at Mega Man 1. Okay, now stop laughing. Just entertain the hypothetical for a second. Say you and your friend both beat the game. Hypothetically, whoever has the highest score would be better because that means they grabbed the most score balls and beat the most enemies and didn't game over. Now, as hyper-specific and unrealistic as this scenario may be, surely this adds some kind of purpose to the score system, right? I mean, if the answer was yes, then this would make for a really weird end to the video, so of course the answer is no. Two players could play nigh identically and their scores would still be wildly different. Why? because the amount of points you get for defeating bosses is literally decided at random. When you select a boss and it shows you how many points you get for clearing the level, I always thought that the number was like dramatically counting up to the final number. Obviously, if you look closely, the numbers aren't counting up, but I just thought the game was trying to be suspenseful. I didn't know the number was literally choosing at random how much score to give you right then and there. I mean, if you're playing on the Legacy Collection, which has a built-in rewind feature, you can just keep re-rolling the score until you get the highest possible payout if you wanted. Though again, why would you want that? Anyways, the score is randomly selected to be worth anything from 50,000 points to 100,000 points in increments of 10,000. That's 6 possible combinations, by the way. They really could have just made the first boss you defeat be worth 50,000, the next worth 60,000, and so on until the last boss, which would be worth 100,000. Or, you know, they could have just not had the system at all. And lastly, Dr. Wily is always worth 200,000 points. On top of that, the castle bosses each give you 100,000 points, except CWU01P, who only gives you 70,000 for some reason. Maybe it's because Wily 3 is such a short level. Oh, and the rematch Robot Masters give you 10,000 each. Although Capcom seems to have forgotten this entirely when including the game in Mega Man The Wily Wars for the Genesis. Bad port, 0 out of 10. Also, the final level is the only place in the entire game where you can find the Yashichi, which instantly refills all your health and all your ammo for every weapon. It's conveniently placed right before the teleporter before you do the final boss refight. The only reason I bring this up, of course, is because the Yashichi also gives you 100,000 points. Or so the manual claims. Before researching this, I honestly, truly couldn't have cared less about the points, but now that I know I've been promised 100,000 points and the game doesn't deliver, I'm pretty mad. How dare you, North American Instruction Manual for Mega Man on the NES? I could forgive you calling Dr. Light Dr. Right, or saying that Mets appear on Gutsman, or even that you claim that there's a crouch button, but this is just too far. So, you defeat Dr. Wily and redeem a clean 200k. You get a nice ending text, and Mega Man takes off his armor and runs home to Dr. Light and unnamed girl character. There's no thank you for playing, and they don't celebrate your final score. And do you want to know why? It's because after beating Mega Man 1, the game spits you back to the level select. There's nothing final about your score, because you can just keep doing the Wily Castle or any other level. If you look at it this way, the game never ends. It just goes forever and ever. Everlasting peace will forever remain just slightly out of reach. Alright, let's crunch some numbers. Let's say you wanted to keep playing the Wily Castle until you max out the score counter, which is 1 point shy of 10 million. I wouldn't recommend doing this because getting a game over would completely reset your score, and there's only 2 extra lives in the entire castle, not counting enemy drops, but let's pretend that you're good at video games. Let's pretend all 6 Robot Masters gave us the lowest possible payout of 50,000 points, and we ignored all other enemies somehow. This gives us a score of 300,000 by the time Wily Castle is first unlocked. Yellow Devil and Copy Robot both give us 100,000 points, CWU01P gives you 70,000, and all 6 refights give you 10,000 each. All of those added together, plus the 200,000 points earned from Wily, totals out to 530,000 points per run-through of the Wily Castle, not counting score receipt from enemies or score balls. 10 million minus 300,000 divided by 530,000 comes out to about 18.3, rounding up meaning you'd have to run through Wily Castle 19 times, or just 18 times, and that remaining 0.3 will be naturally obtained from enemies. Beating Wily Castle casually took me about 20 minutes. 20 times 18 is 360 minutes, add that to the roughly 30 minutes it takes to beat the 6 Robot Masters, and our final total for the Mega Man 1 maximum score run is 6.5 hours. And by the time you achieve maximum score, the score counter will just reset, so it'll look like nothing happened, it'll look like you just booted up the game. I implore you to spend your time doing anything else. I mean, to get all this footage, I just grinded on emulator at like triple speed, and I still feel like my time was wasted. So, what have we learned?